Please be seated. Yes, it's true. I'm slower every day. It's been a long time since I stood at this lectern to share a message with you. I hope I don't freeze up here. My knees are sort of shaking a little bit, but here goes. My dear husband, Bob, says it is my nature to preach. I'm not sure he meant that as a compliment. I would, however, like to publicly thank my husband for his faithful presence and support in my life, and the multiple times I should have asked forgiveness and didn't, and he forgave me anyway. Love does those kind of things. When I was reflecting on our gospel today, I was struck by how many times I said, yeah, that's what I probably would have done. Hearing words I did not want to listen to, the Son of Man being betrayed, killed, and what is this thing about rising on the third day? They did not understand and were afraid to ask. I am a bit like those disciples. Sometimes I don't understand and I'm afraid to ask. Or maybe I'm more like the disciples and just don't get it. I live this in my work life with hospice. People wondering, why is this happening to me? What did I do? How can I avoid this suffering? This is the voice of fear. And the other side of the fear is asking, what if someone explains this truth? And what if I believe it? What if the truth is finally believed, is breaking through my denial, wanting something different, and understanding we have no control over what might happen? Events like these can draw us away from our worldly life to a life that has the potential to steep us in the divine life, the world that we long for underneath our worldly longing and daily activity. We're invited into silence, into listening, into breathing, to accept our human nature, forget our cultural norms, and find a new way to be in the world. I ask you to think about this week. What draws your attention most? Is it the daily tasks and busyness, the schedule, the endless meetings? Or is it the stillness and listening for the heartbeat of God? Listening for the heartbeat of God is no more than listening to your own heartbeat. Now it seems like a leap from Jesus talking about his impending death and the disciples bickering over who was the best, who was first, who was the greatest. I guess when the group is trying to figure out who is Jesus's favorite, it may have been the place to fill the space of not wanting to hear. They don't want to hear these things, and none of us do either. Jesus is asking, even though we know that he knows what the thing is about, but the disciples are speechless. Not a word comes out of their mouth. So who is the greatest? And for me, why aren't those disciples focusing more on the good news and less about disputing who's number one? But don't we all wonder who is at the top of the pecking order in our families? And this was a family. It was a community of people who were chosen to learn the way of Jesus. But in case you hadn't noticed before, the disciples, just like me, are regularly clueless. out to lunch, just not getting it, not wanting to ask the clarifying questions, facing harsh realities. Oh boy, I can relate again. Jesus offers perhaps quite not as sharp a rebuke as last week with the "get behind me, Satan," but it would likely have shocked the disciples to hear Jesus say, "Whoever wants to be first must be last and must be servant of all." And to add to that, his next example of calling a child before them may have confused them even more. Virtually a non-person in the time of Jesus' day were children, males or females, they were children. They had no standing, no place. And so he says, "Whoever comes to me comes to the one who sent me." I want to be clear about this, I think, and it may be my shameless projection, that Jesus is telling them that we must welcome, honor, and protect the least among us, care for the most vulnerable. This is Jesus' message. It takes us directly to Matthew 25, the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the prisoner. Jesus is not talking about who is the greatest. He's talking about who is powerless, the vulnerable, the sick, the needy, the homeless, the grieving, the lonely, the migrant. I think we know who Jesus was talking about. I hope we know who Jesus was talking about. Jesus is inviting us to see that greatness isn't necessarily the most important person, who has the most letters behind their name, who has fame and fortune or power over others. He's inviting us to remember the way of Jesus is a way of sacrifice and openness, of keeping our hearts open to others. Now, coming from a family of 5 children, the perception was that there were favorites. There were the greatest to my parents in our sibling group. And I can tell you, we all thought it wasn't us. We always thought somebody else was more beloved or more special, or mama's pet or daddy's angels. But perhaps the attempt to be number one was a challenge for us, just as it was for the disciples. We're living the same kind of challenges even today. At least for me, it wasn't until I experienced life that I realized that it is the one who sacrifices, who loves wastefully, according to John Spong, who is always there for us, who is the greatest. My friends, as you go through this week, please stop to reflect on what it means to be not only the greatest, but the least. And is the least the greatest? To be the one who stoops at the feet of another, metaphorically or literally, to offer help and hope, to listen and hear the cry of those who are the least among us. And think about what we as individuals or us as a corporate body can respond to in love and friendship. There are lots of people out there that need friends. I enjoy listening to Freakonomics on Saturday. I don't know if anybody else is a Freakonomics junkie, but I think it's the closing of the podcast that always strikes me in the heart when Stephen Dubner says, "Take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of someone else." Now, in this season of creation, of giving thanks for the gifts we have been given, our family, our friends we don't even know, the earth, the stars, and the full moon shining on the desert, our four-legged companions who keep us constantly in their love. Let us think about how we might be able to care for someone else or for something else. To think about what we wish to leave to future generations, to hold and to love as we have been held and loved. May we never forget who we are and whose we are as we tread gently on Mother Earth. Amen. Now, this is the hard part for me. I'm finished with one thing, but I want to say to this congregation, I'm overwhelmed. Man, I thought I brought water up here. I'm overwhelmed by the love and the outpouring of wisdom that has come from you over these past 7 years. It is not easy to leave this place. When we moved to Tucson in 1995, we noticed this little church just across the street just across Oracle, where we exited from our condo, the Episcopal sign, and we thought, wow, that's great, we could walk to church. And it was Church of the Apostles, and we were there from the beginning and gone for a period of time, and welcome back home when we came here in 2015. I need each of you to know that I love you. If there's ever been anything that I've done to hurt or dismiss you, please forgive me. And that goes for you in Zoom land too. During my sabbatical in February, I did a 28-day discernment retreat, and it was led by a Zen master and a Roman Catholic woman. And one of the things that I learned is that practice and discipline, practice in Buddhism and discipline in Christianity are pretty much the same. We have a lot of overlap. But one of the things that I keep going back to over and over is something from a man called Ihai Dogen, who is the founder of the Soto School of Zen in 13th century Japan. And he says, you can understand Buddhism, but you cannot go beyond your abilities and your intelligence unless you have Robai Shin, grandmother mind, the mind of great compassion. It's been my experience that all of you practice that. And one way that we looked at it when I was in that training was that we have a soft front, a welcoming heart, and an understanding stance. But we also have a strong back. We know what we believe, we know how we practice, and we know what we're called to. And you folks continue doing that. And I know you will continue doing that over and over again. Thank you for the privilege of letting me be here with you. Thank you.